We are here today to talk about the situation in our prisons. When I took office nearly a year ago, I inherited prisons on the brink of collapse. Despite the immediate measures that we took to avert disaster, this crisis has not gone away. David Gork will soon publish his sentencing review. It will set out how we end this cycle of crisis once and for all. But today, I will talk about the situation that we face now and further measures that we must take to stabilise the prison population. To do so, I would first like to turn to Amy Rees. Until recently, Amy was Chief Executive of His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, having started out 24 years ago as a prison officer on the wings. Now, the department's interim permanent secretary, Amy will set out the scale of the challenge that we face today.
Thank you, Lord Chancellor. The total prison population is 88,087, and the adult male estate is operating at approximately 99% of its capacity. Every year, on our current trajectory, the prison population rises by 3,000. And now, we expect to hit zero capacity to entirely run out of prison places for adult men in November of this year. The population has been rising rapidly for many years. In 1993, the population was less than half of its current level, at around 40,000 prisoners. When I first joined the service in 2001, it was 65,000. In recent years, it has accelerated rapidly to its current levels and is forecast to be more than 100,000 by 2029. The primary cause of this is clear. Sentence lengths have increased considerably. In 2005, the average custodial sentence was 13 months. By 2023, it was 21 months, a 66% increase. We now have a larger population of sentenced prisoners in our prisons serving longer sentences than they used to. While this is the primary cause, it's not the only cause. The number of offenders brought back to prison after being released, known as recall, is a significant, though lesser, contributing factor. In 1993, the recall population was virtually non-existent at around 100 prisoners. By 2018, it was 6,000. And since then, levels have soared, more than doubling to 13,600 in March this year. Until now, successive governments have attempted to manage prison capacity primarily by carrying out early releases. In late 2023, the prison system was running at around 99% of its capacity. Faced with the prospect of running out of prison places altogether, the end of custody supervised licence scheme was introduced in October 2023. This meant eligible prisoners were automatically released up to 18 days before their scheduled release date. Later, this increased to 35 days and then up to 70 days in May 2024. This measure prevented prisons from running out of places entirely, but it only bought the service time. By July last year, prisons were again operating close to maximum capacity. Ministers announced plans for some prisoners serving standard determinant sentences to be released automatically at the 40% point of their sentence, rather than 50%. A surge of these releases took place over 2 tranches in the autumn and again prevented prisons from filling up entirely. In parallel, we have brought in other smaller scale measures to manage capacity. This includes moving some risk-assessed offenders out of prison and on to home detention, tagged and curfewed for a longer period. These measures are important, but they do not address the scale of the challenge we face. As I have said, the prison population is rising by around 3,000 a year, the equivalent of 2 large prisons every single year. Even with these measures in place, we will run out of prison places in just 5 months' time. The operational reality of running prisons so close to their maximum capacity is that it creates a set of interconnected and escalating problems. Even before you run out entirely, our prisons become more dangerous places. With limited space, it becomes harder to manage prisons, and the challenges of violence and drugs grow. This makes prisons less safe, and it leaves staff with less time to get prisoners to work and education, vital to ensuring that they leave prison less likely to reoffend. We are already reliant on a small number of police cells in some parts of the country where we hold offenders temporarily. If capacity gets even tighter, as an exceptional measure, we would activate Operation Early Dawn. This means we convene a team at 5:30 a.m. every day to track each individual potentially coming into custody so that we can make sure there will be an available space for them. Early Dawn was activated between the 19th of August to the 9th of September last year, prior to the implementation of early releases. It was also previously activated in October 2023, March 2024, and May 2024. In recent weeks, we have come close to activating Early Dawn once again. If Operation Early Dawn is unable to manage the flow of prisoners, the situation becomes intolerable. We would, at this stage, see the managed breakdown of the criminal justice system. Police holding cells would be full, and the police would be faced with being unable to make arrests. Courts would need to consider bail for offenders they would normally consider dangerous enough to remand to prison. If the system reaches that point, there would be a clear risk to public safety, and the only solution would be rapid emergency releases. This would mean offenders being let out of prison without time for probation officers and other services to put in place the release plans needed to protect the public. And even this would only buy us time. The prison population will keep rising. Without a longer-term plan, sooner or later, we would run out of places once more. That is the situation in the prison service as it stands today. And I'm now going to hand back to the Lord Chancellor to talk about the path forward from here.
Let me start with a conclusion that Amy cannot say, but I will. It is shameful that this country in 2025 finds itself in this cycle of crisis. It is shameful that for so long the last Conservative government failed to reckon with the reality of a rising prison population. When Labour was last in government, we increased prison capacity by 28,000 places. In their 14 years in power, the Conservatives added just 500 additional places, leaving our prisons on the brink of collapse. This government will end the cycle of crisis. We will bring order and control back to our prisons. And that starts by building more of them. Last December, we published a long-term building strategy setting out our aim to open up 14,000 prison places by 2031. This is the largest expansion of the prison estate since the Victorians, and we are not wasting time. We've already committed £2.3 billion to prison expansion, and since taking office, we have delivered 2,400 new places, and we will now go further. While the spending review is ongoing, I can announce today that the Treasury will fund our prison expansion plans in full across the spending review period. This is a total capital investment of £4.7 billion. It allows us to start building 3 new prisons, including breaking ground on a site near HMP Gartree later this year. This investment will also fund new cells at existing prisons, with new house blocks and rapid deployment cells opened across the country. This is a record prison expansion. And after the long delays under the last government, who allowed their backbenchers to block every project, we are building at breakneck pace. But we must be honest in a way that my predecessors never were. Prison building is necessary, but it is not sufficient. We cannot build our way out of this crisis. Despite record prison building, the population is simply rising too fast. By spring 2028, even with the funding that I have announced today, we will be 9,500 places short. The conclusion is clear. We have to do things differently. In October, I appointed David Gauke to lead an independent review of sentencing. He has been ably supported by a panel that draws together expertise from across the criminal justice system. Now, I cannot and will not get ahead of their recommendations, but let me be clear about the task that they have been set. The sentencing review must ensure there is always space in prison for dangerous offenders. To achieve this, the panel will have to recommend a reduction in the length of some custodial sentences and an expansion of prison outside of prison for those offenders who can be managed in the community. At the same time, I have set David a clear condition. We must protect the public in whatever measures we pursue. Too often today, our prisons do the opposite. They create better criminals and not better citizens, with 80% of offenders now re-offenders. Across the world, there are models that we can learn from. And David and I both visited Texas earlier this year. There, offenders who comply with a strict regime earn an earlier release, while those who behave badly are locked up for longer. Crime there is now at a 50-year low, reoffending is down, and the prison population is under control. Meanwhile, technology, both existing and emerging, clearly has the potential to transform community punishment. A study published last week shows our radio frequency tagging is cutting reoffending by around 20%. And emerging technology presents us with further opportunities. We are entering a world where tech has the potential to impose a digital prison outside a prison, surveilling offenders even more closely than they can be watched in jail. To make our streets safer, we must seize on these opportunities. While the sentencing review offers us our path to ending the capacity crisis in our prisons for good, it will take time to take effect. The impact of sentencing reforms will not be felt before spring next year. On our current trajectory, hitting zero capacity in November, we simply do not have that time. Now, there will be no return to the releases we saw late last year, but I have always been clear that if further measures are required, I am willing to take them. So today, I am announcing a measure that will target the recall population, which has more than doubled in 7 years. We will bring legislation in the coming weeks that means those serving sentences of between 1 and 4 years can only be returned to prison for a fixed 28-day period. Some offenders will be excluded from this measure, including any offender who has been recalled for committing a serious further offence. We also will exclude those who are subject to higher levels of risk management by multiple agencies, where the police, prisons, and probation services work together. This measure builds on previous legislation introduced by the last government, who mandated 14-day recalls for those serving sentences of under 1 year. And crucially, it buys us the time we need to introduce the sentencing reforms that, alongside our record prison building plans, will end the crisis in our prisons for good. The consequences of failing to act are unthinkable, but they must be understood. If our prisons overflow, courts cancel trials, police halt their arrest, crimes go unpunished, and we reach a total breakdown of law and order. I was confronted by that prospect when I took office. I am confronted by it again now, but I will never let it happen. This problem was years in the making. It was obvious to each of my predecessors, but they all failed to act. I believe this was unconscionable. It was the final disgrace of the last Conservative government. And however hard it might be, I will not repeat their mistakes. This government is building new prisons, more than any other in the modern era. But we are also facing into the fact that after 14 years of inaction, we cannot just build our way out of this crisis. This government will do whatever it takes to ensure that we never run out of prison places again. Thank you very much. Now let's take some questions, folks. Let's go to Seema.
Hello, hi, Seema from the BBC. Can you just explain how many people will be released as a result of these measures that you're saying? So can you put a number on it? And second, if that's okay, what would you say to a victim whose perpetrator was recalled for breaching their restraining order, for example, and they said that this spoof, they've labelled it as outrageous, and have said that some criminals would be given an easy way out without the scrutiny of a parole board, because our understanding is that the parole board part of the assessment would be taken out. Under the fixed-term recall measures that I'm announcing today, we believe they will create around 1,400 prison places. We believe that that number will allow us to get from November into spring of next year. As you'll have seen on the slides earlier, we are on track to hit zero capacity within our prison estate by November, and this measure will tide us over until any changes from the sentencing review start to hit the system. And look, I understand the concerns of victims groups and others. The very worst thing that could happen is that we hit zero in November. And as Amy and I have both described, at that point you see the breakdown of law and order in this country. If we hit zero in November, then police cannot make arrests, courts can't hold trials, and the whole system then collapses. So we cannot allow that to happen, and it is my job to make sure that that does not happen. Sophie.
Hi. So do you think it will be a personal failure of yours if prisons are still facing a capacity crisis at the end of the Parliament?
What I've promised is we are never going to be in this position again. I walked into the department last year facing the complete collapse of our prison system, and we have been dealing with that crisis every single day ever since. And I've already made lots of decisions designed to buy us time until we can bridge to a longer term solution, which is why I asked David Gauke to do his independent review into sentencing. I am determined that this government makes the changes. We are doing record prison building of a kind that we have never seen in the modern era. So we are building, and we're going to deal with the demand so that we never run out of prison places in this country again. I'll do the other Sophie now because I think I failed to distinguish between the two of you, so sorry about that. Yes, there are two Sophies.
So last week we spent a day filming at Preston Prison, one of the most overcrowded in the country, and we went back this week to do a live programme from there. And honestly, it was pretty clear to me that the system is not working. But the problem is the public seem to want prisoners locked up for longer, according to the polling. And we know that this is the number 10 that is pretty sensitive to public polling, that has a history of buckling after a few tweets from Nigel Farage or from Robert Jenrick. So I guess my question to you is, are you prepared to be unpopular?
The thing I'm prepared to do is to make sure we never, ever run out of prison places again. At the moment, as things stand today, by November, we go down to zero. Going down to zero was this prospect that faced me when I came into office, where I knew within days and weeks we would hit zero again. That's why I say it is the unconscionable that the last government left us in this position. And
are you prepared to be unpopular?
I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to keep this country safe, to make sure that we never run out of prison places and that we never see the collapse of either the prison system or our wider law and order system in this country, and that we never put that at risk ever again. Let's go over there. Matt.
Matt Dathan from The Times. You talked about a future situation where you'd have a digital prison. It's easier to monitor people in prison. Is that really punishment if they're sitting at home watching Netflix?
Well, look, we're very clear, and this is something that I've asked the Independent Sentencing Review to look at, which is how to make sure that we have good community punishment that the public can have confidence in, that ensures that the punishment element of a sentence is retained, but that also helps us rehabilitate offenders so that they turn into better citizens rather than the better criminals that unfortunately we are producing far too many of today. And the innovation that we are seeing in technology will ultimately enable us to go further. I think that whether you are seeing people on tags or within prison, it is a curtailment of liberty. And curtailment of liberty is one way in which our society tells offenders that this is how they are punished when they break the laws and the rules that all of us live by. So we're not sacrificing any of those principles. But of course, in expanding the range of community punishment, we will want to make sure that that is a new system that the public can have confidence in as well. Let's come to Charles.
On the people who will be entitled to the 28-day fixed recall, will it include people who are on domestic abuse offences? And what if someone goes out, commits another offence, goes back in, then commits another offence? So in other words, you have a prolific offender, and so will they just end up bouncing back out and back in? How do you deal with that?
The exclusions will exclude serious further offences. So if somebody who is currently on licence commits a serious further offence, they will be excluded from the 28-day fixed term recall. They will be on what is known as the standard recall, so they will go back in for longer. And we will also exclude those offenders who are under multi-agency review and assessment as well. So that does cover those sex offenders, violent offenders. That will include those who are serious domestic abusers as well, who are already in the purview of multiple agencies, the police, local authorities, prison service, probation and others. They will be excluded from this measure as well. Let's do Carl.
Thank you. Carl Dinnan from ITV News. Probation officers who will be looking after these people out in the community say they're already so stretched they can't do their jobs properly. Are you creating a risk that in order to make prisons more safe, you're going to make towns and communities less safe?
Well, I've already announced that we are increasing the number of staff that we have in our probation service. When I came into office, we said we would recruit a further 1,000, which is a number that we hit. We exceeded it, in fact, by 57. And for this year, coming year, we will onboard a further 1,300 probation trainees as well. So we are increasing the number of people within our probation service. We are also already trialling technology designed to improve productivity, so to automate some parts of the jobs that the probation officers currently do on file preparation and so on, freeing them up to do the bit that only they can do, where they bring the human touch and they deal with the offender in front of them and help really think about how we get that person to turn their back on a life of crime. So we're already pivoting the probation service into a position where it can handle some of the asks that we are making of them, and our probation officers do a fantastic job day in, day out. I'll say more about what we're doing with the probation service in the coming weeks and months as well. Let's go to Dave.
Thank you, Lord Chancellor. When you announced the early release scheme last year, you went on to tell the House of Commons that you would publish figures on the numbers of prisoners released. 8 months on, you still haven't done that. Don't the public deserve to know how many people you've let out before you start extending further concessions to other types of prisoners?
Well, we have actually just done the release data just a little earlier in April. So I've already fulfilled that commitment on publishing the data. And of course, when we did the emergency release programme last year, for both of those tranches that came out, we also released that data as well in ad hoc publications, which is the thing that I committed to do in the House of Commons. And our April data release does contain the figures around SDS 40 and indeed all of the other data that we regularly publish on prisons. Let's go to Julia.
Julia from The Sun. During SDS 40 there was a huge issue with tags not being ready and people being released from prison and not being tagged for weeks, in some cases it was months. When you talk about a digital prison outside of prison, what promise can you make to victims that their perpetrators are actually going to be tagged, when in the past we've seen that that's not been the case?
Well, the first thing I would say is the tech works. We are very confident that whether they're radio frequency tags, GPS tags, or alcohol monitoring tags, sobriety tags, which a few of you have trialled out for us, they all work. The tech is strong, it works, it does the job. There have been issues with the performance of our contractor, Serco, on the administration of the tags, and that was something that we saw last year. That performance has improved. Myself and the Prisons Minister have been monitoring that directly and working closely with Serco, and the performance is now in a much better position, and the backlog that was there at the tail end of last year has now been cleared. So we will carry on monitoring the performance of that contract very, very closely and take any measures that we need to make sure that the performance is up to scratch. But the tech itself, that really does work. And we know from the study that we published just last week that a radio frequency tag, people wearing that, we cut reoffending by 20%. So the tech is there and it works. Let's see, Rajiv.
Do you need to get legislation related to the sentencing review onto the statute books by the autumn? If you don't, is there a chance that you may have to order another early release scheme? And if I may, as a West Midlands MP, you'll be well aware of the impact and consequences of Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech. Are you happy to repeat the Prime Minister's phrase that immigration curbs, that without immigration curbs, the UK risks becoming an island of strangers?
Well, just on your first question, Rajiv, the David Gauke's independent sentencing review will be published in the next few weeks. We will respond, and then we will take forward the measures that we want to pursue, and of course we will need to legislate. We will legislate at pace, and as I described earlier, currently we're on track to come down to zero capacity in November of this year. That's why I've announced the measures on fixed term recall today. We would anticipate that any changes from a sentencing bill could start having an impact on the system from April of next year. So that's the timeline that we are working to. We're moving very, very quickly, but it's because we want to make sure we never have to do emergency releases again, and that we can get the system into sustainability as quickly as possible and make sure we never run out of prison places again. And then on your second question, look, I agree with the Prime Minister that without curbs on migration, without making sure that we have strong rules that everyone follows and that we have a pace of immigration that allows for integration into our country, we do risk becoming a nation of people estranged from one another. And what he has described is something that I absolutely believe in, and which are the values of the Labour Party, which is a desire to see this country as a nation of neighbours. But we can't just passively think that that's going to happen. That's an active choice as to the sort of country you want to be. And we cannot turn the other way whilst people in our country, citizens, are becoming estranged with one another over the issue of immigration. We have a duty, if we want to be a nation of neighbours, exactly as the Prime Minister has described, that we take active steps to make sure that that is what happens. And I absolutely support the Prime Minister in that.
You're happy to repeat the phrase that he uses, which is that immigration curbs, without immigration curbs, the UK risks becoming an island of strangers.
Yes, it is a risk that we are running. Without immigration curbs, it is self-evidently true that people in our country will become more estranged from one another. And if we want to build a nation of neighbours, we have to take active steps to make sure that that is what happens. And that matters to me deeply personally as well, as someone who's the child of immigrants. We cannot take for granted the fact that in this incredible, democratic, pluralistic country like ours, we have a very tolerant, decent, fair-minded nation. That's something you have to work at. You can't just bank it and hope it never changes. It's an active process. And what the Prime Minister was describing and the policies that he and our government are pursuing is designed to make sure that we never, ever put the best of our nation at risk. Let's do Jane from Channel 4.
Thank you. If people that the system decides need to go back into prison spend less time on recall, do you accept that increases the risk to the public?
Look, I think the thing that brings the most risk to the public is if we go down to 0 places in our prison system by November of this year, which is what we are currently on track to do. And I am simply not willing to take that risk. We have described today the things that will mean for everybody in our country, where police cannot make arrests and courts cannot hold trials. And as Amy described, we start to see the breakdown of the law and order system in our country. We're not willing to take that risk. We cannot hit 0 places in our prison estate in November. That is the legacy of the last Conservative government, and it is why we are the government that is making the decisions on record prison building and the independent sentencing review to make sure we're never in this position again. I'm not willing to take the risk of running out of prison places. And then final question to Anahita from PA.
Hi. Thank you, Chancellor. Just to ask, the Plan Secretary previously said that the early release scheme is likely to create capacity until autumn 2025. So now you're looking at changes for recall. If these measures don't work, what else are you looking at doing so that we don't hit 0 by November 2025?
Well, these measures will create around 1,400 prison places. We've already made changes to home detention curfew, which I announced in Parliament a few months ago. They will start to have an impact later this summer. The combination of these changes, we believe, can take us to spring of next year. I won't pretend it's not difficult looking at those prison numbers as they fluctuate day by day, week by week. It's why I'm so angry at the legacy of the last Conservative government for putting us and the country, in fact, most important is what they've done to the country, that they've left us in this position where the prison system has been in this state of crisis and on the verge of collapse for so long, and it's why we're determined to put that right. Thank you very much, folks. That's all we've got time for. Thank you.